Because now again, we have looked at a method of data collection for primary source from three methods. One is observation, interview, and questionnaire. Let us now look at how to formulate effective questions, because for observation you need not have to formulate any question. But however, if you have to go on with interview and questionnaire, you may have to formulate questions. And what are the few guides that may lead us to formulate an effective questions is what is going to be covered by this video presentation. Before going on with the rules that we need to set to formulate an effective question, we need to look at the forms of questions. So there are two forms of question. One is called as open-ended question and one is called as close-ended question. So for this video presentation, we'll be using O as open-ended question and abbreviation C as close questions. Open-ended questions are questions made without possible responses after these questions. So possible responses are usually not given. Again, in case of questionnaire, respondents have to write down the answers to the questions in or his or her own words. In case of interviews, researchers have to record the answers either in verbatim or in summary told by the respondent. So that's again the difference between interview and questionnaire. So open-ended question, basically an open-ended in nature, you don't have possible responses given next to these questions. However, for close-ended questions, possible answers are set out in the questionnaire or schedule. The respondents just have to tick from the category. In case of questionnaire, respondents have to tick. In case of interview, the researchers will tick from the category. And most of the time, it's seen that rigid 4 to 5 categories are being given as an answer, but it's always advisable to provide a category or an option called as others or please explain, so that even if the responses are not within the category, people have the opportunity to write the other responses that they feel about that question. So these are basically open-ended and close-ended questions, meaning open-ended means you have diversity of answers to be given to that question. In close-ended, the answers are basically being chosen by the researcher or predetermined by researcher. Respondents or the researchers, they have to just tick depending on the respondents' answers. Again, if we talk about close-ended question, let's just give an example of close-ended question, but this can also be true for open-ended question. The choice and purpose of questions are very important. For example, if you want quantitative analysis at last and you want to use statistical procedures to your questions, you want to analyze the data through some statistical tests. In that case, framing of question is very important. So if you have framed the question, again the classification of responses is very important. So if you have framed the open-ended question, then you get some responses from open-ended question. Then the way you classify the responses will determine whether it can go to statistical analysis or not, or the way you have classified the category of the responses predetermined in closed-ended question will again determine whether your data can be analyzed through statistical procedures or not. For example, let us look at question C and question CA. Question C talks about what is your average annual income, and the respondents have to write in under $10,000, and the last one is above $40,000. But in case of CA, we see that the average annual income is given in, though they are also given in some category, but this category, if you just look closely, we cannot do some statistical analysis, like we cannot take out median, mode, we cannot take out standard deviation and all for this one. So we cannot even take out basic statistical figures like average. So in case of question C, we can take out basic statistical figures like mean of the data. We can take out average. You can take out mode of this data. So basically, the kind of responses that you are classifying is very important. Looking at again the framing of questions. So if you are framing a question and if you want to analyze these questions through quantitative analysis, then classification of responses, as shown in this example, is very important. So the explanation is given here. You can also read it yourself. So advantages and disadvantages of open-ended and close-ended questions. In close-ended questions, the categories of responses are preset, meaning the respondents have already the researcher has already set the responses that the respondents can tick. So the categories are already preset. But however, in open-ended, the categories are not preset. The respondents can provide and they can think over the issue. They can provide diverse and variety of answers to the questions. So the disadvantage of the categorization of responses in close-ended questions leads to not think on the issues deeply by the respondents. So categorical responses not lead respondents to think, and they'll get some kind of like attitude that it's very easy to tick in case of close-ended questions, and it's very hard to write in case of open-ended question. And they will not think much about the answers, and they will just feel like ticking very easily. So thinking over an issue is given best by the open-ended questions. In case of application, if you see at close-ended questions, if you look at the factual information, if you want to get more factual information or facts, then that's been given by the C. And though open-ended questions also give us more facts and figures, but open-ended questions gives us less amount of facts and figures as compared to close-ended questions. Sometimes respondents may hesitate to certain sensitive questions like income generated by them in a year. So if we just give responses in categories, they can just tick from those categories. But however, if you just pose a question, what is the average annual income from your house? If you just give as an open-ended question, then respondents may not be willing to give for such sensitive questions. However, open-ended questions are seen to be more dynamic, or seen to be more appropriate towards seeking opinions, attitudes, and perceptions of the respondents. If you look at depth and variety, open-ended questions provide more depth and variety platforms for the responses. However, the data that you get from open-ended questions are very difficult to analyze, and if you really want to analyze, then you need to go a step further to analyze the information, and that analysis is also sometimes called as content analysis. But if you look at close-ended questions lack depth and variety, but however they are very easy to analyze because they are already set in categories by the researchers. And if you look at the investigators' biasness, in case of cross-ended questions, it's seen to be more biased looking at the responses, because the responses are all given by the investigator or researcher, and whatever investigator or researcher feels that the answers for these questions are usually being given in the responses, and these responses are not exactly the responses that has to be given by the respondents, but these are actually made by the researchers. So in that case, slightly biased if you look at from the investigators point of constructing these responses. But if you look at open-ended questions, almost eliminates the biasness of the researcher. So let us now look at the last slide, that's on formulating effective questions, and what are the simple rules that you need to take into consideration. So whenever you are constructing a questionnaire, try to make use of simple and everyday language. Do not use sentences like, is anyone in your family a dipsomaniac? So this is completely a different kind of thing. Even if you cannot expect all of your respondents to be very literate, very highly educated. Even if they are educated, they may not be very used to with your technical jargon. So it's very important for us to use simple and everyday language. Do not use ambiguous questions like, is your work made difficult because you are expecting a baby? So if you pose such kind of question which has got dual meaning, difficulty in work and expecting a baby, so ladies may take no, most of the ladies may take no, because they may be facing difficulties in work, but they are not expecting a baby. And some may take no because they may be feeling they may be expecting a baby, but they are not feeling difficulty in work. So some may take yes because they may be feeling difficulty in work. Some may be taking yes because they may be expecting a baby, but they may not be relating these two things together. So these questions are quite ambiguous, and it will lead us to have problems when we are analyzing the data. Another questions can be such questions like, are you satisfied with Canton? So this is again an ambiguous question, because looking at Canton, you have got lots of services in Canton, fooding services, the cleanliness, the services given by the Canton people. So if you are not satisfied with all of these categories, then that's when you are not satisfied with Canton. But if you feel that you're not satisfied with just one of the components, let's say the cleanliness of the Canton, then that's wrong for us to write that you're not satisfied with the Canton. So again, an ambiguous question here. Do not use double-barreled question, meaning do not put one question over another question in just same question line. For example, how often and how much time do you spend on each visit? So how much time do you spend on each visit is one question. How often, for example, in a week, how often do you go? Like, is it 3 days, or is it like 5 days a week? Or in a month, how often do you visit? And again, looking at the time, how much time do you spend is another question. So do not use question over question. Another question can be, does your school have a special recruitment policy for children and women? Again, children's policy may be different, women's policy may be different. So again, an ambiguous question here. Again, double-barreled question. Do not ask leading question. So this is again very important. Do not ask question which leads to our answer. For example, unemployment is increasing, isn't it? So it's something that you are directly expecting your respondents to say that it's increasing. So instead of that, you can directly write, what do you feel about unemployment, whether it is increasing or decreasing? So that will be non-leading question. So leading question can be, unemployment is increasing, isn't it? Smoking is bad, isn't it? So this is again a leading question, because you are leading the respondents to give the answer that smoking is bad. So do not lead your respondents to give certain answers that you are expecting them to respond to us. And do not use questions based on presumptions. So do not presume that your respondents will have that one. Your respondents will be getting acquainted with those things. So example, how many cigarettes do you smoke in a day? So you are not firstly acquainted with the respondents. You do not know whether the respondents are smoking cigarettes or not. And if you're directly asking questions like how many cigarettes do you smoke in a day, that's again a wrong way of questioning your respondents. So these are few of many guide to formulating effective questions. In next video presentation, we are going to look at how exactly are we going to construct your questions in order for us to have a better instrument. Thank you.